The idea had been simple enough. Outline the trajectory of a story about a fatal misjudgment that a single human life, extinguished by the cold calculus of an alien council, igniting a firestorm of galactic proportions to 45 minutes to tell the tale of arrogance, underestimation, and the shocking power of a species pushed too far. But before the flames could rise, before the council could fall, we needed to set the stage. Imagine a cosmos teeming with sentient life, a tapestry woven with the threads of 1,000 civilizations, at its center, the Galactic Council, a body ostensibly dedicated to maintaining peace and order. In reality, it was a club of the powerful, the ancient, the self-proclaimed enlightened, species whose roots stretched back millennia, their empires built on conquest and exploitation, now cloaked in the guise of diplomacy. Their laws were etched in stone, their power absolute, or so they believed. Their arrogance stemmed from their perceived superiority. They charted the stars for eons, mastered technologies beyond human comprehension, and shaped the very fabric of reality. They saw themselves as shepherds of the galaxy, guiding the lesser species towards enlightenment. And then, humanity appeared at a blip on the radar, a newcomer from a backwater system. Brash, ambitious, and technologically lacking. They were dismissed as primitives, a curiosity to be observed and perhaps, eventually, assimilated into the grand tapestry. The council had no reason to fear them. After all, what could a species barely out of its cradle possibly do to challenge the established order? This fatal underestimation would soon prove to be their undoing. The stage was set, the players introduced. Now, let's delve deeper into that initial contact. That fleeting moment when the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance that humanity's arrival on the galactic scene wasn't heralded by grand pronouncements or declarations of intent. That IT was a slow, creeping expansion driven by insatiable curiosity and the relentless pursuit of new frontiers. Their ships, initially crude and slow by council standards, ventured further and further into the unknown, mapping uncharted territories, establishing small colonies on resource-rich worlds. The Council observed this expansion with detached amusement. Their sensors registered the primitive energy signatures, the inefficient propulsion systems, the lack of sophisticated shielding. They saw humanity as a child playing in a sandbox, unaware of the true dangers that lurked beyond the horizon. Their initial assessments were based on incomplete data, filtered through the lens of their own biases. They focused on the technological disparity, ignoring the intangible qualities that made humanity unique. Their adaptability, their resilience, their unwavering determination. The first official contact was a brief, almost accidental encounter. The human scout ship, charting a nebula on the fringes of Council space, stumbled upon a patrol vessel of the HFY, a reptilian species known for their ruthlessness and territoriality. The HFY, eager to assert their dominance, hailed the human ship, demanding identification and purpose. The human captain, a woman named Eva Rostova, responded with cautious politeness, explaining their mission of exploration. The HFY, unimpressed, ordered them to leave immediately, threatening to destroy their ship if they refused. Rostova, sensing the danger, complied, retreating back into the nebula. The incident was reported to the Council, but dismissed as a minor inconvenience. Primitives squabbling at the edge of the garden. One counselor remarked, "Nothing to concern ourselves with." But this seemingly insignificant encounter was the first crack in the dam, the first sign that humanity was not as docile as they appeared. IT was a harbinger of the storm that was to come. The HFY encounter faded into the background noise of galactic politics, another minor skirmish in the endless dance of expansion and territoriality. The Council continued to monitor humanity's progress, or rather, what they thought was humanity's progress, remaining secure in their assessment of the species' inferiority. Then came the incident that a lone vessel, a sleek, experimental human scout ship called the Dauntless, captained by a young, ambitious officer named Commander James Ramirez, ventured too far, pushing the boundaries of known space. Searching for rare minerals vital for advanced alloys, Ramirez and his crew strayed into a region claimed by the Ziziglorg, a reclusive, xenophobic species known for their technological prowess and unwavering loyalty to the Council. Unlike the KRYLL, the Ziziglorg did not issue warnings or demands. They simply acted. The Dauntless was ambushed, its shields overwhelmed by a barrage of energy weapons. Ramirez, realizing the futility of resistance, ordered his crew to abandon ship in escape pods while he remained at the helm, desperately trying to transmit a distress signal. Only one escape pod managed to launch before the Dauntless was crippled, its warp drive disabled. The Ziziglorg, unwilling to risk a prolonged engagement, disabled the ship further and towed it back to their homeworld. Ramirez, the sole surviving member of the crew, was taken prisoner. News of the capture reached the Council, triggering a flurry of debate. The Ziziglorg demanded permission to interrogate and then dispose of the human, viewing him as a potential threat. Some counselors, particularly those from species bordering human space, echoed these concerns, seeing Ramirez as a symbol of human expansionism. Others argued for a more cautious approach, suggesting that they study Ramirez to gain insight into human capabilities. But the wheels were already in motion. Fear, prejudice, and a desire to assert their authority ultimately led the Council to a decision that would irrevocably alter the course of galactic history. They decided to make an example. The Council chamber was a swirling vortex of alien forms and echoing pronouncements. Holographic projections flickered, displaying tactical data, sensor readings, and simulations of potential outcomes. The air crackled with tension, the weight of their decision pressing down on every being present. The arguments were multifaceted, reflecting the diverse interests and prejudices of the Council members. The Ziziglorg representative, a towering figure encased in metallic armor, argued for immediate execution. This human, it boomed, its voice distorted by electronic filters, trespassed on our territory, violated our sovereignty. He is a spy, a saboteur, a harbinger of invasion. His continued existence poses a direct threat to the security of the Council. Others echoed this sentiment, pointing to humanity's rapid expansion, their relentless pursuit of resources, and their disregard for established boundaries. The KRYLL representative, still smarting from their earlier encounter with Eva Rostova, saw Ramirez as an opportunity to send a clear message. Humanity would not be allowed to encroach upon their space. But there were dissenting voices. The Eldar, an ancient and enigmatic species known for their wisdom and foresight, cautioned against rash action. This human, their representative, a shimmering, ethereal being, intoned, is but one individual. His actions do not necessarily reflect the intentions of a species. To execute him would be an act of aggression, an escalation that could have unforeseen consequences. The debate raged for days, fueled by fear, suspicion, and a deep-seated arrogance. The Council, blinded by their perceived superiority, failed to see humanity for what it truly was, a species on the cusp of greatness, capable of both immense destruction and unimaginable innovation. Ultimately, the voices of fear prevailed. The Council, swayed by the arguments of the Ziziglorg and their allies, voted to execute Commander James Ramirez. The decision was sealed, the fate of a single human determined by the cold, calculating logic of an alien council. They had made their choice. Now, they would face the consequences. The execution was swift, clinical, and broadcast across the council's network. They wanted to make a statement, a chilling reminder of their authority. They wanted to instill fear, to deter any other species from challenging their dominance. Ramirez was brought before a tribunal of Ziziglorg officials, his face gaunt, his eyes filled with a mixture of defiance and resignation that he offered. No pleas, no apologies. He simply stood tall, a solitary figure facing the might of the Galactic Council. The method of execution was chosen for its symbolic value. Molecular disintegration, that a beam of concentrated energy would erase him from existence, leaving no trace, no body to mourn, no grave to visit. It was the ultimate act of erasure, a denial of his very being. the energy beam materialized, bathing Ramirez in its blinding light. He spoke. His words, translated and broadcast across the network, were simple, yet profound. You may destroy my body, but you will never break my spirit. Humanity will remember this day. The beam intensified, consuming him in a flash of white. And then silence. The council members watched with grim satisfaction, believing they had averted a potential threat. They had sent a message, loud and clear. Humanity would lure its place, but they were wrong. They had not extinguished a threat. They had ignited a fire. The broadcast of Ramirez's execution sent shockwaves throughout human space. Grief turned to rage, sorrow to determination. The council had underestimated humanity's capacity for both love and hate, their unwavering loyalty to their own. The memory of Ramirez, his sacrifice, became a rallying cry. A symbol of defiance against tyranny. It was the spark that would ignite a revolution that would shake the foundations of the Galactic Council and reshape the destiny of the galaxy. The Council had chosen oblivion for Ramirez, and in so doing, set in motion their OWNI in the immediate aftermath of the broadcast. A smug silence settled over the council chamber. The ZZ-Glorg representative puffed out its metallic chest, basking in the perceived victory. The KRYLL nodded in approval, their reptilian eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Even some of the more moderate council members breathed a sigh of relief, believing they had successfully contained a potential threat. They convened celebratory meetings, exchanging self-congratulatory platitudes and reaffirming their commitment to maintaining order in the galaxy. They spoke of the importance of decisive action, the need to deter future transgressions, and the unwavering strength of the Council. They believed their actions had sent a clear message to humanity: know your place. Throughout the Council's sphere of influence, other species murmured their agreement, or at least their outward compliance. Some, like the subservient Grolak, offered effusive praise, eager to curry favor with the ruling powers. Others, like the cautious Vorith, remained silent, carefully weighing the potential consequences of speaking out against the council. That a few, however, harbored secret doubts. The Eldar, their ancient wisdom attuned to the subtle currents of the galaxy, sensed a shift in the balance of power. They saw the execution not as an act of strength, but as a sign of weakness, a desperate attempt to cling to a fading authority. The Independent Trade Guild, a powerful consortium of merchants and entrepreneurs, worried about the potential economic repercussions. Humanity was a burgeoning market, a source of valuable resources and innovative technologies. Alienating them could have devastating consequences for galactic trade, but these dissenting voices were drowned out by the chorus of self-assurance. The Council, blinded by their arrogance, failed to recognize the storm brewing on the horizon. They were convinced that they had quelled a rebellion before it could even begin. They were wrong. Very wrong. The true shock was yet to come. The galaxy would soon learn that underestimating humanity was a fatal mistake. The human response did not begin with a bang, but with a collective intake of breath. A stunned silence descended upon Earth and its colonies, a silence broken only by the quiet sobs of mourning. The execution broadcast had been received on every channel, every frequency, a stark and brutal reminder of humanity's place in the galactic order. Initially, there was disbelief. How could the Council, the self-proclaimed guardians of peace and justice, commit such an act of barbarity? How could they so casually disregard the life of a human being? Then came the grief. Families mourned the loss of a son, a husband, a father. Friends remembered Ramirez as a brave and dedicated officer, a man of integrity and compassion. The human spirit, resilient as it was, seemed to buckle under the weight of sorrow. But beneath the grief, a deeper, more potent emotion began to simmer. Anger to righteous fury, fueled by a sense of injustice and betrayal. The Council had not merely killed a man. They had attacked humanity's pride, their sense of self-worth. Calls for justice erupted across the human colonies. Protests filled the streets, demanding retribution for Ramirez's death. Petitions flooded the planetary governments, urging them to take action against the Council. Initially, these calls were met with silence. The human governments, still relatively young and inexperienced on the galactic stage, were hesitant to challenge the authority of the Council. They feared the consequences of open defiance, the potential for economic sanctions, or even military intervention. They issued carefully worded statements, expressing their condolences to Ramirez's family and urging the Council to reconsider its policies. But these diplomatic overtures were dismissed as weak and ineffectual. The Council, emboldened by their perceived victory, ignored humanity's pleas. And that was their second mistake, HFY dismissing humanity's grief by ignoring their calls for justice. They had underestimated the depth of their resolve. They had lit the fuse of a powder keg, and the explosion was about to rock the galaxy. The calls for justice, unanswered by diplomacy, soon morphed into something far more tangible: economic warfare that IT began subtly, almost imperceptibly, that a collective decision, made not by governments or corporations, but by individual consumers. Human citizens, enraged by the Council's indifference, began to boycott goods and services originating from Council member worlds. They stopped buying Brilliance spices, ZZ Glorgen technology, and Eldar artifacts. They canceled contracts, severed trade routes, and refused to participate in any economic activity that benefited the species responsible for Ramirez's death. IT first. The Council dismissed it as a minor inconvenience, a temporary outburst of emotion. They believed that economic realities would eventually prevail, that humanity would return to its senses and resume its role as a consumer in the galactic marketplace. But the boycott persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. Human businesses, motivated by patriotism and a desire for revenge, stepped in to fill the void, producing their own versions of the goods and services that had been boycotted. Human ingenuity and innovation flourished. As companies raced to develop alternatives to Council products, the economic impact began to ripple through the Council's sphere of influence. Brilliance spice merchants found their warehouses overflowing with unsold goods. ZZ Glorgen technology manufacturers saw their orders plummet. Eldar artisans struggled to find buyers for their intricate creations. The Independent Trade Guild, initially hesitant to take sides, began to feel the pinch. Human consumers, a significant portion of their customer base, were no longer buying their goods. Pressure mounted from human businesses to sever ties with Council member worlds. The Council, finally realizing the gravity of the situation, attempted to intervene. They issued sanctions against human businesses, threatened to cut off access to vital resources, and even hinted at military action. But it was too late. The economic dam had broken, and the floodwaters of human defiance were washing away the foundations of the Council's power. The economic disruption was merely the opening as the Council scrambled to mitigate the damage. Humanity unleashed the next phase of their plan: information warfare. The Internet, a sprawling network of interconnected computers and databases, had always been humanity's greatest strength and their greatest weakness, that a source of boundless knowledge and innovation. It was also a breeding ground for misinformation and propaganda. Now, it became a weapon that a collective of anonymous hackers, calling themselves Ramirez's Ghosts, launched a coordinated assault on the Council's digital infrastructure. They bypassed firewalls, cracked encryption codes, and infiltrated secure databases, leaking sensitive information to the galactic public. The leaks revealed a shocking tapestry of corruption, hypocrisy, and abuse of power. Documents surfaced detailing the Council's manipulation of trade routes, their exploitation of weaker species, and their involvement in illegal arms dealing. Holographic recordings emerged showing Council members engaging in lavish parties, funded by embezzled resources. The galactic public, initially indifferent to humanity's plight, was outraged by these revelations. Species that had long suffered under the Council's oppression saw an opportunity to voice their grievances. Protests erupted on Council member worlds, demanding transparency and accountability. The Council, reeling from the economic fallout, now faced a public relations disaster. They attempted to censor the leaks, to discredit the hackers, and to spin the information in their favor. But the truth was out, and it could not be contained. The revelations shattered the Council's carefully constructed image of benevolence and authority. They exposed the rot that lay beneath the surface, the decay that had been festering for centuries. The galactic public, once awed by the Council's power, now saw them for what they truly were, a group of self-serving elites clinging to power at any cost. Humanity had struck a devastating blow, not with weapons of mass destruction, but with the power of information. They had weaponized the truth, and the galaxy would never be the same. While the Council was preoccupied with damage control, desperately trying to salvage what remained of their reputation, humanity was quietly preparing for the final phase, military awakening. For decades, they had concealed their true technological capabilities, deliberately projecting an image of technological inferiority. They had allowed the Council to believe that they were a primitive species, incapable of posing a serious threat. IT was a carefully orchestrated deception, a long con designed to lull the Council into a false sense of security. Beneath the veneer of technological backwardness, human scientists and engineers had been working tirelessly, pushing the boundaries of science and innovation. They had reverse-engineered alien technology, adapted it to their own needs, and developed groundbreaking new technologies that surpassed anything the Council had ever seen in hidden shipyards, scattered across the solar system and beyond. A new fleet was taking shape, sleek, powerful warships, armed with advanced weaponry and protected by state-of-the-art shielding. These were not the crude, inefficient vessels that the Council had dismissed as primitive. These were machines of war designed to challenge the dominance of the galaxy's most powerful empires. The Council's intelligence agencies, focused on monitoring humanity's economic and political activities, completely missed the buildup. They were blinded by their preconceived notions, unable to imagine that humanity could possess such advanced technology. When the first images of the new human fleet surfaced on the galactic internet, they were initially dismissed as hoaxes, elaborate fabrications designed to further undermine the Council's authority. But as more images emerged, as sensor readings confirmed the existence of ships, the truth became undeniable. Humanity was not the primitive species they had believed. They were a force to be reckoned with, a sleeping giant that had finally awakened, and they were coming for them. The galaxy held its breath. The first strike was surgical, precise, and devastating. Humanity did not launch a full-scale invasion, a chaotic and indiscriminate assault on Council territory. Instead, they targeted key infrastructure, carefully selected to maximize impact while minimizing civilian casualties. Human fleets emerged from warp, their advanced cloaking technology rendering them invisible until the last possible moment. They struck at Council military bases, communication hubs, and strategic resource depots, crippling the Council's ability to respond. The attacks were coordinated with ruthless efficiency. Human warships, equipped with advanced targeting systems and energy weapons, sliced through Council defenses with ease. Drones swarmed enemy vessels, disabling their shields and crippling their weapons systems. Unlike the Council, which had prioritized brute force and overwhelming firepower, humanity emphasized precision and restraint. They targeted military assets, avoiding civilian populations whenever possible. They sought to disable, not destroy, to cripple the Council's war machine without causing unnecessary suffering. The attacks were not acts of vengeance, but acts of calculated strategy. Humanity sought to dismantle the Council's power structure, to force them to the negotiating table, to create a more just and equitable galactic order. The Council, caught completely off guard, struggled to mount a defense. Their fleets, outdated and ill-equipped, were easily outmaneuvered and outgunned by the human forces. Their communication networks, crippled by the initial attacks, were unable to coordinate a unified response. Panic spread throughout the Council's sphere of influence. Species that had long relied on the Council for protection now questioned their ability to defend them. Alliances crumbled, trust eroded, and the foundations of the Council's power began to crack. Humanity had drawn first blood, and the galaxy watched in stunned silence, waiting to see what would happen next. The Council's reign of dominance was being challenged, and the future of the galaxy hung in the balance. The sheer audacity of the human attacks sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Species that had long viewed the Council with a mixture of awe and fear now looked upon them with a newfound sense of skepticism. The carefully cultivated image of invincibility had been shattered, replaced by a stark and unsettling reality. The Council was vulnerable. The Council members themselves were stunned. The Glorg, who had spearheaded the call for Ramirez's execution, were now facing the brunt of the human offensive. Their homeworld was under siege, their defenses crumbling under the relentless assault. The KRYL, eager to prove their loyalty, launched a series of counterattacks, but their efforts were easily repelled by the superior human technology and tactics. Their warships were decimated, their pilots outmaneuvered, and their reputation tarnished. Even the Eldar, with their ancient wisdom and foresight, were taken aback by the speed and ferocity of the human response. They had cautioned against rash action, but they had not anticipated the depth of humanity's resolve, the extent of their technological advancements. The Independent Trade Guild, sensing a shift in the balance of power, began to reassess their allegiances. They secretly reached out to human representatives, offering to mediate a peaceful resolution to the conflict. They saw an opportunity to profit from the chaos, to position themselves as key players in the new galactic order. The galactic public, initially horrified by the violence, began to question the Council's judgment. Had they provoked this conflict unnecessarily? Had they underestimated humanity's potential? Were they truly the benevolent guardians of peace and justice that they claimed to be? A growing chorus of voices demanded answers. Protests erupted on Council member worlds, calling for an end to the war and a restructuring of galactic governance. The Council, once revered and respected, now faced a crisis of legitimacy. That humanity's actions had not only crippled the Council's military capabilities, but they had also undermined their moral authority. The galaxy was beginning to question the very foundations of the Council's power, and the future was uncertain. The Council, desperate to regain control, launched a series of disorganized and ill-conceived counterattacks. They threw their remaining forces into the fray, hoping to overwhelm the human fleets with sheer numbers. But their efforts were futile. Their tactics were predictable, their strategies outdated, and their troops demoralized. Human forces easily repelled their attacks, inflicting heavy casualties while sustaining minimal losses. The Council's counterattacks only served to further expose their incompetence and weakness. The Glorg, driven by a desperate desire to defend their homeworld, resorted to increasingly desperate measures. They deployed experimental weaponry, unleashed biological agents, and even considered activating ancient defense systems that could have catastrophic consequences for the entire sector. But humanity anticipated their every move. They intercepted their transmissions, countered their attacks, and neutralized their threats with ruthless efficiency. They showed no mercy to the Glorg, holding them accountable for their role in Ramirez's execution. The KRYL, sensing the impending doom, attempted to negotiate a ceasefire. They offered to denounce the Council, to provide intelligence on their allies, and to pledge their allegiance to humanity. But their offers were rejected. Humanity had not forgotten their earlier aggression, their eagerness to assert their dominance over the human scout ship. As the Council's counterattacks faltered, internal conflicts began to erupt. Species that had long been loyal to the Council turned on each other, vying for power and resources. Alliances crumbled, trust evaporated, and the Council descended into a state of chaos and infighting. The Eldar, watching from afar, lamented the Council's downfall. They had warned against rash action, but their voices had been ignored. They saw the destruction of the Council as a tragedy, a loss of knowledge, and a disruption of the delicate balance of the galaxy. That humanity's response had not only shocked the galaxy, it had shattered the Council's illusion of unity and strength. The Council was crumbling from within, its foundations eroded by fear, greed, and incompetence. The Battle of Xylos became the defining moment of the war, the turning point that sealed the Council's fate. Xylos, a strategically important planet rich in valuable resources, became the site of a massive confrontation between human and Council forces. The Council, desperate to break the human stranglehold, threw everything they had at Xylos. Wave after wave of warships, fighters, and drones swarmed the planet, hoping to overwhelm the human defenses, but humanity was ready. Human fleets, positioned in orbit around Xylos, formed an impenetrable wall of steel. Their advanced shielding absorbed the brunt of the Council's attacks, while their energy weapons decimated the enemy forces. Human fighters, nimble and agile, danced through the chaos, outmaneuvering and destroying their lumbering counterparts. But it was not just technology that gave humanity the edge. It was their teamwork, their coordination, and their unwavering determination. Human pilots fought side by side, protecting each other, sharing information, and adapting to changing circumstances. They were a cohesive unit, a well-oiled machine, while the Council forces were a disorganized rabble. One particular incident highlighted the human spirit. A human cruiser, the Spirit of Ramirez, was heavily damaged by a Council barrage. Its shields were failing, its weapons systems were offline, and its crew was facing certain death. But instead of surrendering, the captain of the Spirit of Ramirez ordered his crew to ram the flagship of the Council fleet. The Spirit of Ramirez, engulfed in flames, slammed into the Council flagship, triggering a massive explosion that destroyed both vessels. The sacrifice of the Spirit of Ramirez turned the tide of the battle, demoralizing the Council forces and inspiring the human troops. The Battle of Xylos ended in a decisive human victory. The Council fleet was decimated, their defenses shattered, and their hopes extinguished. The galaxy now knew, without a doubt, that the Council's reign of dominance was over. In the wake of the Battle of Xylos, humanity issued an ultimatum to the Galactic Council. They demanded the immediate dissolution of the current Council and the establishment of a new galactic governing body, one based on principles of cooperation, transparency, and individual rights. The ultimatum was broadcast throughout the galaxy, reaching every corner of known space. It was a bold and audacious move, a direct challenge to the established order. Humanity was not simply seeking revenge for Ramirez's death. They were seeking to fundamentally transform the galaxy. The Council, reeling from their defeat at Xylos, was in disarray. Some members argued for a negotiated settlement, hoping to salvage what remained of their power. Others called for a last stand, vowing to fight to the death to defend their authority. But the majority of the Council members, sensing the inevitable, began to abandon ship. They secretly reached out to human representatives, offering to cooperate with the new regime in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Humanity, however, was not interested in deals or compromises. They demanded unconditional surrender, a complete and total dismantling of the Council's power structure. They were determined to create a new galactic order, one that would be free from corruption, oppression, and injustice. As the deadline for the ultimatum approached, the Council's internal conflicts intensified. Accusations flew, alliances crumbled, and the Council descended into a state of utter chaos on the final day. With mere hours to spare, the remaining Council members reluctantly agreed to humanity's demands. They signed a formal declaration of dissolution, relinquishing their power and surrendering themselves to human authorities. The Galactic Council, which had ruled the galaxy for centuries, was no more. A new era was dawning, an era shaped by the will of humanity and the promise of a more just and equitable future. But the path to that future would not be easy. The galaxy was still fractured, divided by centuries of conflict and mistrust. The challenge of building a new order would be immense. The days following the Council's surrender were a whirlwind of activity. Human diplomats and negotiators spread out across the galaxy, meeting with representatives from various species, forging alliances, and laying the groundwork for the new galactic government. The former Council members, stripped of their power and influence, were left to face the consequences of their actions. Some were arrested and put on trial for their crimes, their corruption, and their abuse of power. Others were exiled, forced to live out their days in obscurity, haunted by the memory of their past glory. The ZZ Glorg, held primarily responsible for Ramirez's death, faced the harshest penalties. Their homeworld was placed under human administration, their military was disarmed, and their leaders were held accountable for their crimes. The ZZ Glorg were forced to confront the consequences of their xenophobia and their unwavering loyalty to the Council. The KRYLL, eager to redeem themselves, cooperated with the human authorities, providing valuable intelligence and assisting in the apprehension of corrupt council officials. They sought to rebuild their reputation, to prove that they were capable of change, and to earn a place in the new galactic order. The Eldar, with their ancient wisdom and foresight, played a crucial role in the transition. They offered guidance and advice, helping to navigate the complex political landscape and to bridge the cultural divides that separated the various species. The Independent Trade Guild, sensing an opportunity for profit, eagerly embraced the new regime. They invested heavily in human businesses, forged new trade routes, and helped to rebuild the galactic economy. The former council members faced justice, and the galaxy prepared for a new beginning. The human representatives grappled with the immense task of building a new government. They faced countless challenges, navigating complex political alliances and age-old animosities, all while striving to create a fair and equitable system for all. The future of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. The transition from the old order to the new was not without its challenges. The galaxy was a complex and diverse place, and the task of uniting its disparate species under a single government was a monumental undertaking. One of the biggest challenges was the issue of accountability. How should the former council members be held responsible for their crimes? Should they be subjected to harsh punishments, or should they be offered a path to redemption? Humanity, mindful of the need for justice but also wary of the dangers of vengeance, sought to strike a balance. They established a galactic tribunal, composed of representatives from various species, to investigate the crimes of the former council members and to determine appropriate punishments. The trials were long and arduous, filled with accusations, counter-accusations, and conflicting testimony. The ZZ Glorg, as the primary instigators of Ramirez's death, faced the harshest scrutiny. Their leaders were convicted of war crimes and crimes against humanity and sentenced to life imprisonment. The KRYLL, having cooperated with the human authorities, received a lighter sentence. Their leaders were fined and forced to publicly apologize for their past actions. They were also required to undergo a period of re-education, designed to instill in them a greater respect for human rights and galactic law. The Eldar, while not directly involved in the Council's crimes, were criticized for their inaction. They were accused of failing to use their wisdom and influence to prevent the Council from committing atrocities. In response, the Eldar pledged to play a more active role in the new galactic government, using their knowledge and experience to promote peace and justice. The trials concluded and the punishments were meted out. The galaxy began to heal. The wounds of the past were still raw, but the promise of a better future offered a glimmer of hope. Humanity, having overthrown the old order, now faced the challenge of building a new one that would be worthy of the sacrifices that had been made. With the old order dismantled and the former council members facing justice, humanity turned its attention to the daunting task of building a new galactic government. They envisioned a system based on principles of cooperation, transparency, and individual rights, a stark contrast to the corruption and oppression that had characterized the Council's rule. The first step was to establish a galactic charter, a document outlining the fundamental principles and values that would guide the new government. Human diplomats worked tirelessly with representatives from various species, negotiating compromises and forging consensus. The charter enshrined the rights of all sentient beings, regardless of their species, their origin, or their beliefs. It guaranteed freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of assembly. It prohibited slavery, torture, and other forms of abuse. The charter also established a system of checks and balances designed to prevent any single species or group from accumulating too much power. It created a galactic senate, composed of representatives from all member worlds, and a galactic executive, responsible for implementing the laws and policies enacted by the Senate. Humanity, mindful of the dangers of imperialism, deliberately limited its own power within the new government. They refused to accept any special privileges or advantages, and they insisted on treating all species as equals. The new galactic government faced numerous challenges. There were still pockets of resistance, species that refused to accept the new order and clung to the old ways. There were also economic disparities, cultural differences, and long-standing animosities that threatened to undermine the fragile peace. But humanity, with its unwavering determination and its commitment to justice, persevered. They worked tirelessly to bridge the divides, to promote understanding, and to build a better future for all. The galaxy was still healing, but the seeds of hope had been sown. Among the many human diplomats and negotiators who played a crucial role in shaping the new galactic order, one figure stood out: Eva Rostova, the captain who had first encountered the KRYLL patrol vessel many years before. Rostova, having risen through the ranks of the human diplomatic corps, possessed a rare combination of intelligence, compassion, and unwavering determination. She had witnessed firsthand the Council's arrogance and indifference, and she was determined to ensure that such injustices would never happen again. Rostova became humanity's representative to the Galactic Senate, a position that gave her significant influence over the new government's policies and priorities. She used her platform to advocate for the rights of marginalized species, to promote economic equality, and to foster cultural understanding. Rostova was a skilled negotiator, able to bridge cultural divides and to forge consensus among even the most disparate species. She was also a powerful speaker, able to inspire others with her vision of a better future. One of Rostova's most significant accomplishments was the establishment of a galactic peacekeeping force, a neutral military organization responsible for maintaining order and preventing conflicts throughout the galaxy. The peacekeeping force was composed of officers and soldiers from various species, all trained to uphold the principles of justice and nonviolence. Rostova also played a key role in establishing a galactic court system, a body responsible for adjudicating disputes between species, and for enforcing galactic law. The court system was designed to be impartial and transparent, ensuring that all species had equal access to justice. Under Rostova's leadership, the new galactic government made significant progress in addressing the challenges facing the galaxy. Economic disparities were reduced, cultural understanding was fostered, and the threat of war was diminished. The galaxy was not perfect, but it was far better than it had been under the Council's rule. Humanity, once dismissed as a primitive species, had become a beacon of hope, a force for positive change in a galaxy long plagued by corruption and oppression. And Eva Rostova, the human captain who had dared to challenge the established order, had become a symbol of that change. Centuries passed. The new galactic order, shaped by humanity's vision and guided by leaders like Eva Rostova, endured. The principles of cooperation, transparency, and individual rights became deeply ingrained in galactic culture. The threat of war diminished. Economic disparities were reduced, and cultural understanding flourished. But the memory of the Council's reign of terror and the sacrifice of Commander James Ramirez was never forgotten. IT served as a constant reminder of the dangers of arrogance, prejudice, and the abuse of power. The story of humanity's rise to prominence and the Council's spectacular downfall became a galactic legend, a cautionary tale told and retold throughout the centuries that IT was a story of courage, resilience, and the triumph of justice over tyranny. Some species learned the right lessons from the story. They embraced the new galactic order, committed themselves to the principles of peace and equality, and worked to build a better future for all. Others, however, harbored resentment and bitterness. They clung to the old ways, secretly plotting to restore the Council's power and to reclaim their lost privileges. They saw humanity not as a beacon of hope, but as a threat to their way of life. The galaxy remained a complex and volatile place, and the struggle between good and evil continued. But humanity, forever changed by the events of the past, stood vigilant, ready to defend the principles of justice and freedom against any threat. The execution of Commander Ramirez, intended to instill fear and to assert the Council's dominance, had ultimately backfired. IT had ignited a fire of rage and determination within humanity, a fire that had consumed the Council and reshaped the destiny of the galaxy. The Council had underestimated humanity, and they had paid the ultimate price, and the galaxy, forever changed by their misjudgment, would never forget. And so, the story concludes, not with a triumphant fanfare, but with a quiet reflection. The galaxy, forever scarred by the Council's arrogance and humanity's response, entered a new era. Was it an era of genuine respect and understanding, or one of grudging compliance born of fear? The answer, perhaps, lay somewhere in between. For some species, the memory of the Council's cruelty served as a powerful incentive to embrace the new galactic order. They saw in humanity a model of resilience, determination, and unwavering commitment to justice. They genuinely sought to build a better future, one based on principles of equality and cooperation. For others, the transformation was less profound. They complied with the new rules, but their hearts remained unchanged. They harbored resentment towards humanity, viewing them as conquerors rather than liberators. They saw the new galactic order as a temporary inconvenience, a hurdle to be overcome before they could reclaim their lost power and privileges. And then there were those who simply sought to survive, to adapt to the changing circumstances, to navigate the complex political landscape without taking sides. They were the pragmatists, the opportunists, the ones who would always put their own interests first. The galaxy, in its vastness and diversity, remained a melting pot of conflicting ideologies and competing interests. The new galactic government, despite its best efforts, could not erase the centuries of mistrust and animosity that had divided the species. But the memory of Commander James Ramirez and the sacrifices made by humanity served as a powerful reminder of what was at stake. It was a reminder that freedom and justice were not simply abstract concepts, but values worth fighting for, worth dying for. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about the dangers of underestimating others. That IT was a lesson that would shape its destiny for centuries to come. The future remained uncertain, but one thing was clear: the galaxy would never be the same.